Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Retire with Style. I'm Alex Murguia,
And I'm Wade Pfau.
and here we are.
I was just thinking, I thought I heard a dog barking in the background. Do you?
Yeah. The moment we started this, my kids walked
Very.
in from school.
Oh, it wasn't dogs, it was your children. I
No,
apologize.
no, no. It was. They were reacting to the door kind of opening up,
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. But so it goes. The show must go on, right, Wade?
That's right. We've got a lot to talk about today in terms of building out the core remaining secondary factors to explain a retirement style. So it's,
Yeah, and real quick, we realize this is our sixth episode in, and we've been kind of doing a recap, so we'll stop now in case folks have been listening to these consecutively. But if you want to know more about the initial factors that we discussed, just check out the previous episodes, and that'll bring you up to speed. Right, Wade?
that's right. Yeah, I mean, we appreciate everyone who's actually listening from week to week as the new episodes are released. But for those of you in the future who are binging through, we realize you may not want to hear a 5 to 10 minute recap at the start of each episode.
All right. And so now, the thing is, why would this is kind of I'm thinking, would people binge to this? When you have Netflix versus Retire with Style, Netflix versus Retire with Style. I can see why we would get those attention dollars when you're deciding. But all right. So wait, what are the two factors that we have left over that we haven't discussed yet that serve as these secondary factors in terms of your retirement income style?
Right. So, well, we had the two primary factors, probability-based safety first and optionality commitment. And then in the previous episode, we discussed two secondary factors, true versus technical liquidity and front-loading versus back-loading. And today, this leaves us with the second two of these secondary factors. So there's 6 factors in all, 2 primary, 4 secondary. The 2 secondary factors we'll discuss today are accumulation versus distribution and perpetuity versus time-based flooring.
Yeah, and you know what got me, Wade, and I think you felt the same way. We thought when we started this that we had a feeling probability safety first was going to be one of the most distinct factors, and the data showed that to be the case. I thought personally accumulation distribution was going to be one of these key factors. Let me quickly, accumulation is, think of it as terms of a mindset where even though when there's an accumulation portfolio, you retire, and then it's more about the accumulation. But put that aside. No matter what the milestone says you should be, people have these. You're creatures of habit, right? If you've done something for 30 years, it's tough to all of a sudden switch that out. And so an accumulation-based mindset is this idea where you just think in terms of the account value. You don't provide too much contextual anchoring towards why you have an account to begin with, other than I want more, and more is better than less. That kind of vibe. And you get this. We see this. You could be a 70-year-old client person, whatnot, and you still look at your portfolio with that eye towards growth. Those kind of blinders. And well, that's the wrong way of saying it, but that kind of perspective. Because it just is what you are, who you are kind of vibe, and so there's this accumulation thing, and you're willing to exchange variable income for a greater net worth with regards to how it's reflected within your portfolio. It's a sense of more, and to some extent, there's that question of rich is more, wealth is kind of enough, if you will. You know when to say when, but accumulation is this implication of wanting to just grow that portfolio, and that's the essence of it, and you're willing to exchange it for a lumpier income stream. Whereas distribution, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the name accumulation comes from the fact that pre-retirement, that's really how most people think about investing. It's maximizing risk-adjusted returns, growing that pot of assets, trying to achieve a wealth accumulation target. And so accumulation versus now post-retirement, do you keep that accumulation mindset or does your mindset shift towards distribution, which is I'm no longer going to be as worried about maximizing my risk-adjusted returns for my investments. I'm much more focused on sustaining a predictable income from those investments. And if getting more predictable, less volatile, more certain income requires sacrificing some of that potential growth, I'm okay with that because my mindset shifts. It's no longer simply about the growth. It's about having that sustainable lifestyle over my retirement. And if you have that distribution mindset, you're shifting more towards thinking about predictable income instead of simply thinking about growth for the portfolio.
And the way to think about this, Wade, is I think you're seeing this in 401k plans now, where you're having, and you know, the really good advisors do this, but you see your statements, but you see your statements not just from an account value standpoint, but you see it from the point of view of how much income will this provide. You know, assuming it's a total return approach, et cetera, et cetera. There's that sense of rejiggering towards more of an income orientation when you're looking at your portfolio, and that goes hand in hand. And I don't know about you, now going back to how I started, I thought this would be a greater factor, if you will, than what ended up being when we looked at the results. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it does seem like, right, I would have predicted this to be one of the core secondary factors because it seems to speak so closely to the retirement problem, but also the different ways that people think about the retirement problem. Do they maintain that same investment mindset, or do they shift and have a different type of goal and therefore potentially want to think about whether a different type of strategy would work better towards achieving this goal they have in retirement?
And the way I ended up thinking about this, and it's obvious everything's evolving, right? So maybe in 3 years I think differently, but right now the way I'm thinking about this is in isolation of everything else, in a vacuum, it's a very telling factor, right? But what I'm thinking that's happening in terms of when we look at the results is a lot of what's being explained with this accumulation distribution mindset is kind of being covered by the compilation of probability safety first and optionality commitment orientation. Like the story of accumulation distribution is told, you know, that plot is being told within those two main factors that we brought on, especially when you look at outcomes and things like that. Wade?
Yeah. Once you include those primary factors in the mix, there's not that much left for accumulation and distribution to explain that's truly something of its own, because accumulation is more focusing on market growth and wanting to keep options open. Distribution is committing to a strategy and wanting contractual protections, wanting predictable income over an unknown length of life. And so that's the case. It becomes really a secondary factor just because, again, once you account for what can be explained by these other factors, it's kind of covered already. It doesn't add that much more to the analysis.
Yeah, so that's where we stand. But but in and of itself, it is a style. So you look at it, how we look at it now when we're, let's say, providing this retirement income style analysis profile to folks is we look to see if there are consistencies with what you would expect, and if there aren't, then you can bring up you can bring that up for further discussion. It's really how we're looking at it to see how it can reconcile potentially disparate beliefs. The other factor that we picked up on, in the literature, and we thought, let's see if this is really something here, and this is how you want to deal with essential expenses. And we ended up calling it perpetuity versus time base. Wade?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so whereas I would have expected accumulation versus distribution to be very important, like this one is where, if you're going to say how important are these secondary factors, this one I would have guessed is not going to be that big a deal. And it shows up as a secondary factor, but it is simply, if you think about building a floor of retirement income, and the floor is the idea of, if I do want to cover my essential spending with some sort of protected income, I want to build a floor of income. Do I think about that floor as something that I want to have earmarked over my lifetime? Or do I really think about it as rolling out on a time by time by basis, like a time based? So I want a floor to cover the next 3 or 4 years, for example, and then a couple of years later I might revisit and build out a few more rungs on that floor. But I think of it more time based, not lifetime, versus I do think about it more lifetime. And Alex, you've mentioned on past episodes in terms of coming up with some sort of intellectual foundation for this, your love of the Michael Zucker book, the retirement portfolios. And that sort of concept of different types of flooring, I think, is a big part of what he's talking about in terms of...
Wait, thank God you took. I thought you were going to ask me a question, and I was like, oh my goodness, here we go.
Yes.
I thought you asked me to some reference. I was like, oh my God.
Yes, tell me the 4 different ways he describes flooring. Quiz.
All right, go.
Yeah, but he's
Continue.
got
My
I
heart
think-
skipped a beat there.
I think that's probably where this concept came from, is just he's talking about, do you layer out this flooring brick by brick or piece by piece or rung by rung, or do you want something that's more perpetual in nature?
Yeah, and you could see now, you can begin to hear echoes, right, of different styles. Now, again, I'll preface this by saying these came out as distinct factors, so they are perpetuity time-based isn't another way of saying optionality commitment orientation. It's not another way of saying safety first, probability-based. It just isn't. They came out as different, distinct factors. But that's not to say that there's nothing new being brought by these factors that the others aren't kind of accounting for when it comes to retirement income styles. But nonetheless, you can still begin to hear echoes, right? Perpetuity time-based. If you're high in optionality, you're thinking about bucketing. What is bucketing if not like a variety of time-based strategies, right? If you're thinking about commitment orientation, you're thinking about a floor in perpetuity for essential income. What is an immediate annuity? You're effectively buying a pension for the rest of your retirement. What is that if it's not perpetuity? So you're seeing these sort of different ways at getting at retirement income styles, if you will, and it's important. I mean, we like them as these sort of confirmatory is maybe too strong a word, but these sort of it's great for discovery, because then you could just measure the sense of consistency between someone's answers, and it's just a rich, fertile ground for follow-up questions when there are somewhat inconsistencies.
Yeah, so let's go back to asking a question about each of these. And again, it's not that there's just one question to define a style, but to give a sense of what's involved here. And so with that perpetual time-based flooring, I'll give you these 2 statements, Alex, and let me know where you fall on the spectrum between them. And middle is not an acceptable answer. So first...
Next you're going to ask me to show my work. Which, you know what, those would have been some trying years during my middle school days.
Yes, I have a son who does not like showing his work. Okay, statement 1. I prefer to align reliable income sources with my essential expenses on an as-needed basis. And then the second statement, I prefer to purchase a layer of lifetime reliable income to cover my essential expenses.
I am, drum roll please, I am more on the latter, the last answer, the last question you asked. I'm probably 1 through 6, 1 being the first statement, 6 being the second statement. I'm a solid 5 on this one, Wade. Part of it is just don't want the aggravation. I don't want the aggravation to revisit things over and over, especially if it solves a lifetime issue like essential expenses. I mean, that's where I'm at. Where are you on this one?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar to you on this one in terms of I lean to that lifetime perpetual income floor side, but not extremely so, or at least not like I was with, I'm an extreme backloader, but I'm not necessarily an extreme perpetual income desire goal.
And now, and you can see the first one, right? That I prefer to align reliable income sources with my essential expenses on an unneeded basis. I'm sorry. Yeah.
On and
That,
as.
oh, okay. Well, never mind. I won't be doing any Amazon books or anything like that. But yeah, that's a clear. It's just not. I don't subscribe to that. I can see others doing it, but it doesn't appeal to me. Now, that's one question. If you were to ask another one, let me hit you up with another one of these. I prefer to segment my retirement income strategies by time horizons. For example, shorter horizons and longer term horizons. That's one question. The other one is, I prefer to segment my retirement strategies by expense types. For example, essential and discretionary expenses.
So I do think more in terms of the second statement, but again, not extremely so. Like I can see the appeal of the first statement, but out
Yeah.
of that scale of 1 through 6, again, with 3.5 being in the middle, I'd probably be a 4, which is more of a goal segmented, thinking about like this sort of building out a floor for essential as being distinct from discretionary.
I'm definitely 4.35. No, I'm
There you
not.
go.
I think I'm a 5 again. I'm pretty consistent in that one. And if you notice the nuance in how we asked it, we said segment retirement income, but one was by time, short and longer term horizons. So a shorter term bond, let's say a bucketing strategy, and then longer term, you leave it for the markets. But the other question was, instead of splitting it by time, these temporal allocations, we're splitting it by essential, floor, and discretionary, where you can invest for more upside. I definitely view the world in the last component, and so that
Yeah.
would put me in a little bit of the perpetual camp.
Yeah, that essential perpetual floor. Yeah, I mean, this question, it almost is, as we talk later about strategies, it's kind of a time segmentation versus income protection, the way that second
Yeah,
question is worded.
yeah. So here we have. So that again, that's where I'm at. How did folks? If you're wondering how folks did in general, in that man, what's wrong with me today? In the perpetuity time base, it was more in the 3.46. So it's very close to the middle. Let's say one is time based, 6 is perpetuity. Folks seem to land right in the 4.6. Sorry, 3.4 range. So right in the middle, or very close to it, which is interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought just intuitively folks would have been more time based, but they seem to be more split. What's your take on that, Wade? Not that you need a take.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily even had thought much about how people think about their flooring. So
Well,
it's right in the middle, so that it means there's a good division in the population between how they think about this.
I would have thought, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I would have thought just because you see it more with news, you see a lot of articles about investing, and I think you see a lot more bucketing kind of strategies for retirement income than the, lock it down, and get a floor of essential expenses. I
Yeah,
don't,
in the consumer media. And
yeah, that's why I thought maybe that would have influenced folks, but you're seeing that, no, not really. I mean, people have their way of doing it. Now, accumulation distribution. Kind of jumped the gun on getting into the averages. Uh,
yeah, to
let's look
change
at
pages there.
accumulate. Yeah. So let's look at accumulation distribution. Here, wait, let me read this one. We're switching strategy. We're going from perpetuity time based to accumulation distribution. And yeah, we could explain it, but what does it look like if, someone asks you a question and you have to make a decision here? So wait, here you go. My investment strategy is primarily about portfolio growth, or my investment strategy is primarily about ensuring a sustainable income stream.
Now, something to keep in mind, as we've noted in past episodes, we originally had 900 questions. We narrowed it down. These are questions that did not make the final cut. And I kind of see a problem with this question because
Oh,
I'm I'm not retired yet. And a lot of people who are looking at their style are not retired yet. So I certainly today answering this question, my investment strategy is primarily about portfolio growth. So I would have to be a 1 on this. But I wouldn't answer that the same way, I think, if I was really at the cusp of retirement.
yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so let's imagine let's imagine a world where where you're where you're 64, Wade, all right, and you're
And
on
I'm
that
65.
precipice. You're on that precipice. The fragile decade is upon you. All
Then indeed,
right.
I would very much be probably a 5 or 6, which is really having reoriented how I approach investing to focus more on a sustainable income stream.
But that's the point. Not everyone reorients. Some folks, like I think I think we minimize sometimes that we're creatures of habit. If you've behaved, if you've viewed your portfolio a certain way for 30 years, it's hard to just flip that switch. I truly think that. So, just keep that in mind for you folks that are entering retirement. It's some of the biggest mistakes we see with folks coming in is that if they don't make that switch, it's easy to lose context of why you're investing. You look at your quarterly returns and you're like, what's going on here? My portfolio is less than it was 6 months ago or whatnot. And the reality is, if it hasn't really affected at all the income that you're that you know that you can that the portfolio can provide, assuming it's a total return, that you may have other things in it, et cetera, et cetera. Then if you have this distribution focus, it shouldn't really matter. And I get it. It's oh, but people could be just saying that to kind of avoid the hard conversations about, I don't know, portfolio construction or whatnot. But no, the reality is that switching to this distribution mindset really provides a good context for why you're investing within the retirement milieu, and that's just a better way of looking at things. Not a better way of looking at things, but it's just sometimes a more effective way of looking at it for certain types of retirement income strategies. If you're somebody that you're fine with the variable income, from a withdrawal rate, then knock yourself out. There's, remain in that accumulation mindset, but just self-awareness is a very important quality to have when you're looking at your quarterly returns, to maintain that discipline.
So
So
how
wait,
would you
here's
answer that question, Alex?
the first one.
Yeah, are you focused on
Yeah, you're
portfolio
right. The
growth
context.
or
You're right. No,
sustainable
you're
income?
absolutely right. And right now, my time horizon is such that I'm still in the growth phase, but I'm mentally am ready, knowing that a transition will come upon me, and that the second question, where it's primarily about ensuring a sustainable retirement income stream, will
Hmm.
take precedence. At a certain point, you've taken your shots, right? And you are where you're at. You
And
know.
it's in those 5 or 10 years before retirement that's often called the transition phase to retirement. And it's kind of an issue of, does anything change, or do you keep doing the same thing as you transition into retirement?
Yeah. Here's another question that I think maybe helps with context. I will sacrifice retirement income stability for a potentially larger nest egg. Or I will sacrifice a potentially larger nest egg for retirement income stability.
So for me, I would lean more towards the second statement. So that would be like the score range of 4, 5, or 6. I'd probably go with a 4.
Yeah, I think I would too. From that vantage point, I agree with you. If I'm not quite a 4, I'm a 5. But I'm definitely not a 6, and I'm definitely not a 3.5. Got you,
No, a lot
Wade.
of be 3.5.
I'm definitely not a 3. I think I would be, a 4 or 5. I'd have to see how the spirit moves me when I'm gonna, fill in the question set. Now, how do folks do in general on this one? I mean,
So
this is one that's split down the middle. I'm sorry.
no, it's
No,
not.
it's not. I was looking at
You've got them
perpetuity
in the
time
opposite
based.
order on the page.
My bad. My bad. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah, yeah,
confusion.
yeah, yeah. Wait, why don't you take it away? You do the stats here for a little bit.
So this is another one where it didn't split right down the middle. It's for the accumulation distribution, the average score was 4.06, which is leaning on the distribution side. So there is a
I,
tendency in the population to lean towards shifting to a distribution mindset in retirement.
now, what gets me, and this is where maybe the argument of, and maybe this is why you're seeing kinks in these secondary factors and why they weren't primary, if you will. they're good, they're insightful, but maybe this is where behaviors and attitude change a little bit. Because if I had a dime for every time somebody, looked at their portfolio and they're, let's say, 70 years old and they're thinking about China, or they're thinking about, monetary policy and how that's going to have immediate impact on their portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the answer, if you're in this distribution phase, is just look. And again, there's a caveat, because we're actually implying that these are total returns, since I'm talking about investment accounts. The answer is who cares if it's really gonna provide this sustainable withdrawal. It shouldn't matter. The context of this is within a portfolio distribution, and the reality is, if you're worried about that, you've kind of implicitly you've accepted that this income will be variable, because you have a volatile investment that you're drawing income from. And I just think I wouldn't have expected it to be this high. To be this high, to me, this tells me that, why isn't there more contractual protections present in portfolios? Wade, what do you think? Did I bring it back home, or did I go all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good explanation why this is perhaps a secondary factor. And then another issue to mention is just these correlations between these factors and our two primary factors are relatively high, and therefore, though they present as distinct factors, it's kind of back to the issue of they don't do a whole lot extra beyond the primary factors, because a lot of what they explain can be explained already by our primary factors. And so, for example, if accumulation distribution, if you have a distribution mindset, that tends to correlate with having more of a safety first outlook and more of a commitment orientation, for example. And also, if you have a perpetual time-based orientation, if you want to tell us that one now, because I don't know how you have these letters.
Yeah. It's exactly. I put the acronym upside. I inversed it.
You flipped the acronym.
Yeah. If you have a perpetuity mindset, you're most likely going to be safety first.
And commitment.
And if you have a perpetuity mindset, you're also going to be commitment oriented. There's going to be a strong orientation towards commitment. And
so what it's saying is, like, if you are, like, to say it the other way, if you're probability based and optionality oriented, there's a pretty good chance you'll have an accumulation mindset and a time-based flooring preference. And if you're safety first and commitment oriented, there's also a pretty good chance that you'll also have a distribution mindset and a perpetual floor-based mindset. And so again, you're not getting that much additional information out of these two secondary factors, but they're distinct and they're important and they're worth talking about.
Yeah, and other gender differences. Yeah, you do see on a relative basis, you see women tend to have a higher tilt towards a distribution mindset. I think, again, similar to what we found with others, is that life expectancy may play a role in that. From a marital standpoint, which is surprising to me, but there wasn't any significant difference between the groups. And with perpetuity time-based, there doesn't seem to be any differences between gender or marital status or anything like that, which, you never know, right? So that's sort of a secondary. These are the secondary factors. Now, one that we tried that didn't show up was, we wanted to look into forecasting, non-forecasting, if investment philosophy had anything to do with a retirement income style. Why? No, in the literature, there's a lot about, just multiple asset class portfolios, capture market returns, et cetera, and we wanted to see if there was any sort of splintering with regards to any of these factors, and if you follow a forecasting approach, or if you're more of a non-forecasting approach. And there wasn't much there in terms of retirement income styles around that.
Yeah, and if that terminology is not clear, it's more, if you're a forecaster, you kind of think you can time the market, that you can predict when stocks are going to go up or down, or that you can predict interest rates, or that you can predict any one of the many economic variables out there that could help explain market behavior. And if you have a non-forecasting approach, it's more that random walk idea that you think the market's already priced in all the available information, and it's not practical to try to outguess the next thing that the market's going to do. And so that tends to be backed more by the academic literature, and so maybe more of a sense of being a rational behavior versus all the books out there about charting and market timing and everything else that doesn't have a lot of academic credibility behind it. But again, that we test that factor, but it did not present itself as being distinct. It doesn't help to explain retirement behaviors or retirement styles.
Can't get them all.
That's right.
But no, that sort of wraps up our retirement income styles. And again, with this is where we looked at it, and probability safety first and optionality commitment ended up sort of winning the bake-off, if you will. But there's also interesting reasons why that was so, which we've covered in these previous podcasts. So and then what we want to do now is really we gave hints. We gave a little more hints. I sort of went off a little bit, Wade, right? About how you can put these two factors together and create a matrix, the retirement income style awareness matrix, if you will, the RISA matrix, based on your RISA profile, and how we can effectively begin to use these two factors, put them together.
The two primary factors.
Yeah,
not
two
the
primary
two from
factors.
this episode.
Why don't you do it, Wade? Hey, you're right. I'm confusing myself.
No, we were just
here.
talking about these two factors that aren't so important, but the
Okay.
probability-based safety first and the optionality commitment, just to make sure
Yeah,
people are following along.
How we take that and we create a matrix for the RISA framework. All right? And so what we want to do now is really break that down and show how this framework really leads to, it can help you identify your style, but more so, which we didn't see at the beginning, but how this style translates to a starting point for a strategy. And we're really going to start, rolling up our sleeves on that one. All righty? That concludes today's podcast. Thank you for listening. Wade, you want to take us home here?
Yep, thanks, everyone. Look forward to catching you again on the next episode.
Bye now.